It was almost midnight above the Manhattan skyline. The penthouse shimmered with reflections from Fifth Avenue, the city lights dancing on the glass walls like fragments of a dream. Everything looked perfect. The marble floor, the crystal glasses, the soft jazz playing from the Bang & Olufsen speaker, yet the air was wrong. Too quiet, too sharp. Sarah stood barefoot near the kitchen island, her breathing shallow. The city below glittered like 1,000 witnesses she couldn't reach. On the counter, her iPhone buzzed again. The name flashing across the screen burned into her mind. Emily Harrison. Her fingers trembled as she silenced it. "It's just work," he had said earlier, his voice smooth, too smooth. But even the lies had begun to sound tired. From the hallway, footsteps echoed. Deliberate, heavy, slow. Jake appeared, his shirt half open, his expression unreadable. The Rolex on his wrist caught the golden light, ticking louder than it should. "Why are you still awake?" he asked, voice cold, distant. I wanted to say, "Because my world is breaking apart," but all that left my mouth was a whisper. "Jake, we need to talk." He moved closer, each step cutting the space between us. The smell of whiskey lingered on him, the kind he saved for celebrations. Except tonight didn't feel like one. "I saw the messages," I said quietly. "From Emily." Silence, a silence so thick it felt alive. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, low and slow, like the earth holding its breath. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. His eyes told me everything. The guilt, the arrogance, the cruelty of a man who believed I had nowhere to go. "Sarah," he said finally, his tone shifting. "You're imagining things. You always do." The lights flickered once. My heart did the same. In the reflection of the glass wall, I saw myself. Hair messy, face pale, hands resting protectively on my belly. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for us. I could feel the cold air from the balcony sweep across my skin. He kept talking, about how tired he was, how ungrateful I'd become, how my father's money had spoiled me. Each word was sharper than the last. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But the tears refused to come. Instead, my voice came out steady, fragile but alive. "I'm not afraid of you, Jake." For a moment, the room went still. The jazz stopped. Even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. His eyes narrowed, a flash of something unreadable passing through them. He stepped back, exhaling a bitter laugh. "You should be," he said softly. Then came the sound, a crash, not from him, not from me, but from the world itself. A glass toppled, shattering across the marble floor. The sound snapped through the silence like lightning. In that frozen moment, the camera would see everything. My shaking hands, his rigid posture, the city's reflection splitting across the window like a broken promise. And then, footsteps again. Heavier this time, urgent, echoing from behind the locked door. A voice boomed from the hallway, deep and commanding. "Open the door now." My heart stopped. My father. The scene fades on Sarah's trembling breath as the door handle turns, and the world she thought was collapsing is about to explode. Morning light spilled across the Manhattan skyline, soft and golden, washing away the chaos of the night before. Sarah Miller sat by the wide glass window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the city that once felt like home. The hum of distant traffic mixed with the quiet rhythm of her heartbeat. On the coffee table, a cold cup of Starbucks coffee sat untouched beside her silver MacBook Air. Her phone blinked again, another message she couldn't bring herself to open. I used to love mornings, she thought. I used to believe every sunrise meant safety. At 32, Sarah had built a life that should have been untouchable. She was the head of marketing for a Manhattan tech firm, known for her poise and sharp intuition. Her colleagues admired her, her clients trusted her, and until recently, her husband adored her. She once laughed about working late nights with Jake at the office, both of them dreaming of a future big enough for 2 careers and a family. But everything changed when she saw the first sign, the late meetings, the perfume that wasn't hers, the way his eyes wandered when her belly began to show. Now, every polished surface in the penthouse reflected a stranger's life. The housekeeper avoided eye contact. The silence stretched like glass. On the countertop, 2 champagne flutes from last night still gleamed. Only one had been touched. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. "You're safe," she whispered. "I promise." Behind her, the city buzzed with a million lives, each one moving forward while hers stood perfectly still. The framed photo on the piano caught her eye. Her father, General William Harris, in full uniform, hand on her shoulder. His stern yet loving gaze reminded her of strength, the kind she'd forgotten she possessed. He used to tell her, "Never let anyone decide your worth, Sarah, especially a man who fears your light." She closed her eyes, inhaled slowly, and for the first time since the night before, she let the tears fall. Her phone rang again, this time a FaceTime notification. The name glowed across the screen. Marcus Wright. Marcus had been her college friend, the kind who remembered every detail others forgot, the way she took her coffee, the songs she played when she couldn't sleep. He'd built a tech startup in Silicon Valley, but he never lost touch. "Sarah?" His voice came through the speaker, warm but cautious. "You sound off. Are you okay?" She forced a smile. "I'm fine." "Don't lie to me. I can hear it in your voice." Her lips trembled. "Everything's falling apart, Marcus. I thought Jake loved me. I thought—" Her words broke off into silence. Marcus leaned closer to the camera. "You don't have to explain. Just listen. Whatever he did, whatever's happening, you have people who care. You have me." For a second, she couldn't breathe. The sound of his voice felt like a lifeline thrown into a storm. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "Start with yourself," he said softly. "You're not broken, Sarah. You're just waking up." The call ended, but his words lingered like a melody she couldn't forget. She glanced around the apartment once more. The gleaming marble, the untouched champagne, the empty space beside her on the couch. A part of her wanted to pack up, to run. But another part, the stronger, quieter one, wanted to fight back. Outside, the morning light grew brighter, reflecting off the glass towers of Park Avenue. The city didn't care about her heartbreak, yet somehow its endless motion reminded her that life didn't stop for anyone. Sarah placed her coffee down, opened her laptop, and began typing. Notes, thoughts, plans. Somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered back to life. And then the front door clicked open behind her. She froze. Someone was home early. 3 months earlier, the same penthouse had been alive with laughter, music, and a glow that felt almost cinematic. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered through the tall windows, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the air. It was their celebration night, the moment Sarah and Jake announced the news that was supposed to change everything. The soft hum of a grand piano floated through the room, while guests in designer suits and evening gowns toasted under chandeliers that glowed like liquid gold. The caterers moved swiftly, trays of hors d'oeuvres balanced in their gloved hands. The scent of roses, Dior perfume, and champagne filled the air. Sarah stood near the balcony, one hand resting gently on her small bump, her eyes glowing with quiet joy. Jake had his arm around her waist, his smile wide and practiced. The kind of smile that looked perfect in photos but empty up close. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, raising his glass, "we have some wonderful news to share tonight." Everyone turned. Cameras flashed. The city lights framed them like a movie scene. Sarah smiled shyly, glancing at her husband before speaking. "We're expecting," she said softly. The room erupted into cheers. Her friends hugged her. Someone cried out, "Congratulations!" And her father, General William Harris, stood near the piano, nodding with pride. Even Jake looked genuinely happy, or maybe he was just good at pretending. "I remember that night like a photograph that burns at the edges," Sarah thought. The warmth, the applause, the way Jake kissed my forehead, all of it felt real then. Hours later, after the guests left and the music stopped, the penthouse quieted. She walked through the empty living room, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The city lights still shimmered, reflecting off the half-empty champagne flutes. Jake stood by the window, his tie loosened, staring out over Fifth Avenue. "Can you believe it?" she whispered. "We're going to be parents." He didn't answer right away. His reflection in the glass looked distant, unreadable. "Yeah," he said finally. "Parents." Something about his tone made her chest tighten. It wasn't excitement, it was hesitation, fear, or maybe resentment. She tried to shake it off. "My dad was so proud," she said softly. "He said he's flying in again next month. Maybe we can all have dinner together." Jake turned, forcing a smile. "Sure, that'll be nice." But even as he said it, his phone buzzed on the table. A single vibration, then another. He didn't move to check it. She did. Her eyes caught the name lighting up the screen. Emily H. Her heart skipped. "Who's Emily?" she asked, the words almost playful, almost testing. Jake chuckled lightly. "Just someone from work. She handles one of our clients. Relax. But her instincts whispered otherwise. Something in the way he said, relax, didn't sound like reassurance. It sounded like warning. She let it go that night, too tired to argue. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man she married wouldn't lie to her while she carried his child. Later, when Jake fell asleep, Sarah sat alone on the balcony. The wind tugged at her hair. She looked out over the glowing city, the heartbeat of Manhattan, and whispered to herself, everything's gonna be okay. But even as she said it, deep inside, she knew something had already begun to crack. What she didn't know was that the woman behind that phone call would soon walk into her life and destroy everything she thought she could trust. Jake Miller had always been the man who filled every room with confidence. At 34, he was the youngest vice president in his firm's history. Sharp suits, sharper words, and a smile that could sell anything. People admired him, envied him, feared him a little. On paper, he was everything a woman could want. Successful, charming, disciplined. But behind that polished exterior, something darker had begun to grow. At the office on Park Avenue, the atmosphere was pure Manhattan power. Floor-to-ceiling glass, assistants in tailored coats, the low hum of ambition in the air. Jake sat at the head of the conference table, tapping a Mont Blanc pen against a folder of quarterly reports. His reflection in the window looked every bit the success story he'd spent his life building. But lately, the success wasn't enough. He wanted more. Recognition, control, the kind of influence his father-in-law commanded in Washington. Being Sarah's husband grated at him. Every magazine profile about their life mentioned her first, her connections, her father's name. To Jake, it felt like living in her shadow. He glanced at his phone. A new message blinked from Emily Harrison. Lunch today? Need to discuss the presentation. He smiled faintly. Emily, 29, his newest assistant, had arrived 6 months ago with ambition that mirrored his own. She knew how to listen, how to flatter, how to make him feel like the man in charge. Around her, he didn't feel like the boy who married a general's daughter. He felt powerful again. By noon, they were sitting at a private table at the River Cafe, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. The restaurant glittered with silverware and soft jazz, the kind of place where deals and secrets were made. You look tired, Emily said softly, pouring him coffee. Everything okay at home? Jake leaned back, studying her face. She wasn't beautiful in the obvious way. She was calculated, composed, always knowing the exact thing to say. Sarah's pregnant, he said finally. It's a lot. Emily tilted her head. Congratulations, she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Though, from what I've seen, you're carrying all the weight at work. He laughed quietly. You notice everything, don't you? That's my job, she replied, her voice low, confident. By the time dessert arrived, the line between professionalism and something else had blurred completely. When they left the restaurant, the afternoon sun hit the glass doors just right. And for a moment, Jake's reflection looked like someone he didn't recognize. Back at the office, his assistant handed him a stack of documents and mentioned Sarah had called twice. He slipped the phone into his pocket without replying. That evening, as he rode home in his black Mercedes S-Class, the city lights flashing by, guilt flickered for a second, then disappeared beneath the rush of adrenaline. He told himself it was harmless, just stress, just work. But deep down, he knew he was crossing a line he wouldn't be able to uncross. When he stepped into the penthouse, Sarah was already setting the table. Soft music played, candles flickered. She looked up, smiling. Dinner's ready. Jake paused at the doorway, still hearing Emily's voice in his mind. You deserve more. Great, he said, loosening his tie. I'll wash up. In the mirror, he saw his own eyes, restless, distant, and cold. The kind of eyes that could look at love and see nothing but an obstacle. And as the city glowed outside, Jake Miller made his first quiet decision to betray the woman who trusted him the most. The office on Park Avenue gleamed that morning, sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling glass, reflections bouncing off polished chrome and glass walls. The city below pulsed with energy. Yellow cabs honking, pedestrians rushing, the rhythm of New York at full speed. Inside, the tension was different, quieter, colder. Sarah stepped out of the elevator in a cream blazer that used to make her feel unstoppable. Today it only felt heavy. Her maternity blouse stretched gently across her growing belly, and she carried a folder filled with notes she had prepared all week. It was supposed to be her last big presentation before maternity leave, the campaign she had built from scratch. But something had changed in the air. Colleagues glanced at her, then looked away too quickly. Conversations stopped when she passed. Even the receptionist's smile felt forced. "Morning," she said softly. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller." The receptionist replied, her tone polite but nervous. Sarah's heart tightened. They never used to call her Mrs. Miller. It was always Sarah. When she entered the boardroom, the sight hit her like a chill. Jake was already there, standing at the head of the table, flanked by executives from corporate. His posture was confident, commanding, but his eyes avoided hers. "Sarah," he said smoothly, "we've decided to start without you. Hope you don't mind." Her breath caught. "Without me? This is my campaign." Jake gave a polite, professional smile. "Yes, but the team agreed to take a new direction. Emily has been doing incredible work. She'll walk us through the revisions." Emily stood beside the screen, poised and polished, clicking through slides, Sarah's research, her creative concept now renamed and rebranded. The title had changed, the credits removed, but the ideas were unmistakably hers. Sarah felt her stomach twist. "Jake," she whispered, "this is my presentation." He didn't meet her eyes. "The company's direction has shifted. We need fresh energy. You've got other priorities right now." His gaze dropped deliberately to her stomach. The room fell silent. The unspoken message cut deeper than words. You're no longer part of this world. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, sympathy from some, discomfort from others, and quiet satisfaction from Emily. The projector's hum filled the silence like static. Inside her, a storm brewed, anger, humiliation, disbelief. But she forced herself to stay composed. She sat down, her hands trembling beneath the table, and listened to Emily explain the campaign that had once been hers. Every word was a knife disguised as professionalism. Every smile from Jake was a betrayal wrapped in charm. When the presentation ended, polite applause filled the room. Jake clapped first. "Excellent work, Emily," he said. "Let's move forward with this version." He turned to Sarah. "You can take the next few months to rest. Focus on your health." She wanted to scream. Instead, she gathered her notes, each page now meaningless, and said quietly, "Thank you for the update." She walked out before anyone could see the tears. The hallway stretched endlessly, glass and marble reflecting her image 100 times. Strong on the outside, shattered on the inside. In the elevator, she finally let one tear slip. It wasn't just about the project. It was about respect, about being erased piece by piece by the man who once swore he'd protect her. When the doors opened on the lobby, she inhaled deeply, holding on to what little dignity she had left. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "Saw the meeting notes online. Are you okay?" Her fingers hovered over the screen, then typed back, "No, but I will be." And as she stepped into the New York sunlight, a quiet resolve began to rise inside her. The kind that only betrayal could create. That evening, the Manhattan sky was bruised with rain clouds, the kind that swallowed the sunset before it ever reached the glass towers. Inside the penthouse, the air was heavy with silence. The city's glow reflected off the windows, but none of it reached Sarah. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her work clothes, her phone silent beside her. The humiliation from that morning clung to her skin like dust. Every word Jake had said in the meeting replayed in her mind, each one cutting deeper. "You've got other priorities now." He had said it so casually, as if her entire career, her identity, were a disposable accessory to motherhood. On the nightstand, the lamp flickered, casting thin light across the room. The space was immaculate, almost sterile. Framed photographs of smiling faces, polished marble, untouched champagne glasses from happier days. But beneath the perfection, something was breaking. Sarah placed a hand over her belly. "It's okay," she whispered. "We'll be okay." Her voice cracked. She wasn't sure who she was trying to convince anymore, her child or herself. The door opened behind her. Jake stepped in, the faint scent of cologne and bourbon trailing him. He loosened his tie, his eyes avoiding hers. "You left early," he said flatly. "I wasn't needed," she replied, her tone calm, almost too calm. He shrugged, removing his cufflinks. "You're being emotional again." Her heart clenched. "Emotional?" she repeated softly. "You took my work, Jake. You handed it to Emily like I didn't exist." He turned, finally meeting her eyes. I saved the campaign. You've been distracted, Sarah. It's not personal, it's business. Business? She stood up, trembling. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Jake's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. You're overreacting. You should be grateful I kept you on the project at all. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The weight of his coldness crushed the air between them. For a moment she saw not her husband, but a stranger, a man she couldn't recognize anymore. He reached for his phone, scrolling through messages as if she weren't even there. The screen lit up with a familiar name. Emily. Something inside her snapped. She turned away, tears burning her eyes, her breath trembling. You don't even hide it anymore, she said quietly. You don't care who sees. Jake didn't answer. The silence said enough. She grabbed her coat and walked out before she could fall apart in front of him. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor descending like a heartbeat slowing down. When the doors opened, she stepped into the cold Manhattan night, rain misting her face. The city roared around her, horns, footsteps, fragments of conversations. But inside, she heard nothing. She walked aimlessly for blocks until she found herself outside a quiet bookstore near Lexington Avenue. Through the glass, warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. A display of books caught her eye, titles about healing, strength, and self-worth. One stood out, Women Who Run with the Wolves. She stepped inside, her hair damp, her eyes swollen. The air smelled of paper and coffee. The clerk glanced up, but said nothing. Sarah ran her fingers along the book's spine, opened it, and read a line that felt written for her. The woman who has lost her way must learn to howl again. Her breath hitched. For the first time that day, she let herself cry, not out of weakness, but release. She bought the book, clutching it like a promise, and stepped back into the rain. As she looked up, lightning split the sky over Manhattan. Somewhere inside the storm she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Defiance. And far above her, in the penthouse she had just left, Jake's phone buzzed again with Emily's name, unaware that the woman he dismissed had just begun to find her power. Rain lashed against the Manhattan skyline the next morning, streaking across the glass like restless ghosts. Sarah sat at the small breakfast table, the new book she'd bought from the Lexington Avenue store open beside a steaming cup of coffee. The words on the page blurred in and out of focus, but one line stayed sharp in her mind. A woman reborn is a storm that no one can silence. For the first time in weeks, she felt awake. She hadn't slept much. The confrontation with Jake replayed in her mind, but instead of breaking her, it forged something new: resolve. Every insult, every lie, every stolen idea had built a quiet fury that now pulsed beneath her calm surface. Her iPhone buzzed again, a text from Marcus. "You don't deserve this. Let me help." She hesitated before replying. "I can't leave yet, not until I know everything." Marcus's answer came seconds later. "Then find proof, but be careful, Sarah." She closed her eyes. Proof. That was exactly what she needed. When Jake left for work, she watched him from the window as his black Mercedes S-Class pulled away from the curb, the taillights fading into the gray drizzle. The penthouse was silent now, sterile and cold. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling as she navigated through Jake's shared business accounts. He'd always been careless about his passwords. He believed she'd never question him. Within minutes, she was staring at a series of emails, messages between Jake and Emily. They weren't just about work. There were meeting confirmations at expensive hotels, receipts from the Ritz-Carlton, and even a forwarded photo from a client dinner that clearly wasn't business. Sarah felt her stomach twist. Every pixel on that screen was a lie. But she didn't close the laptop. She copied everything into a secure folder, labeling it with one word: truth. The next file she opened changed everything. A financial document, one with her name on it. It showed a quiet transfer of her shares in the company, authorized with a digital signature she never made. Jake had been planning to cut her out completely. Her pulse quickened. He wasn't just betraying her emotionally, he was erasing her. A sharp knock at the door made her flinch. She closed the laptop fast. The housekeeper entered, holding a package. "For you, Mrs. Miller," she said softly. Sarah took the box and nodded. After the door closed, she peeled away the tape. Inside was a small velvet case and a handwritten note. "For my favorite boss, Emily." Inside the case lay a sleek Montblanc pen, the same kind Jake used in meetings. Her hands shook, not with sadness but clarity. The woman who once believed in love was gone. The woman holding this pen was something else entirely. She reached for her phone and dialed Marcus. "Sarah?" he answered, the sound of city traffic behind him. "I have proof," she said, her voice steady. "Emails, transfers, everything." "Good," Marcus said quietly. "Then we move carefully. You don't confront him yet. You build your case, you let him think he's won." Sarah glanced out at the rain, her reflection fractured by the water on the glass. "I can do that." "Start recording everything," Marcus continued. "Calls, conversations, meetings. Keep it on your phone. When the time comes, we'll make sure everyone knows who he really is." When the call ended, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. She looked down at the Mont Blanc pen again, then at her growing belly. "You and me," she whispered. "We're going to make this right." Outside, the storm began to fade, replaced by the silver light of morning. And in that light, Sarah Miller, the woman who had been humiliated, dismissed, and betrayed, took her first quiet step toward the revenge that would change everything. Because the next time Jake lied to her face, she would be holding the proof that could destroy him. 2 weeks passed. The autumn air had turned crisp, the kind that carried the scent of change through Manhattan's crowded streets. Sarah walked through Central Park, bundled in a beige trench coat, her scarf fluttering in the wind. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly as she watched leaves fall like fragments of her old life. Each morning had become a ritual. Wake before dawn, brew coffee, read a few pages of Women Who Run with the Wolves, and write notes in a leather-bound journal. Not about pain anymore, but about strategy. Every entry was a piece of a larger plan, a quiet blueprint of her return. Marcus called often, always checking in. He had introduced her to a discreet legal advisor who specialized in corporate fraud. Together, they reviewed the evidence she had gathered, the forged signatures, the hidden bank accounts, the string of emails. "You're sitting on dynamite," the lawyer had said. "When the time's right, we'll make sure it explodes in the right direction." That night, Sarah sat in front of her vanity mirror, the skyline glittering behind her. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The tired eyes were gone, replaced by calm fire. The fear that once owned her had burned away, leaving only focus. "I'm not broken," she thought. "I'm reborn." She picked up her phone and scrolled through old photos. Her wedding day, vacations, dinners. Each one looked staged now, as if she were watching someone else's movie. Then she stopped on one, her father standing beside her in uniform, his hand on her shoulder. Strength wasn't something she needed to find. It was already in her blood. When Jake returned home that evening, he barely noticed her. He was glued to his phone, laughing at a message she knew wasn't innocent. She didn't confront him. Not anymore. Instead, she smiled politely, offered him dinner, and recorded every word of his excuses with her phone face down on the table. He was careless, blind to the fact that the woman he thought he'd destroyed was now quietly documenting his downfall. Later that week, she made her first public appearance since the humiliating meeting, a company charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. Everyone expected her to hide, but Sarah arrived early, stepping out of a black car in a tailored navy gown that fit like armor. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed. "Isn't that Sarah Miller? She looks incredible." Inside, the chandelier light shimmered over crystal glasses and gold accents. Jake hadn't arrived yet. When he finally walked in with Emily on his arm, he froze for half a second. Sarah turned slowly, meeting his eyes across the room. Her smile was small but sharp enough to cut. "Mrs. Miller," one of the board members greeted her. "We didn't think you'd make it." "I wouldn't miss it," she said smoothly, her tone calm but electric. She walked past Jake and Emily without a glance, her perfume leaving a faint trail of quiet defiance. Every movement, every look was intentional, measured power cloaked in grace. At the bar, Marcus appeared beside her, dressed in a black tuxedo. "You clean up well," he said, smiling. Sarah chuckled softly. "You have no idea." He handed her a champagne flute, non-alcoholic, of course. "To new beginnings." She raised her glass. "To truth." Across the room, Jake's laughter faltered. He could feel the shift, even if he didn't understand it yet. Sarah wasn't the woman who once begged for his attention. She was the calm before a storm. Beautiful, composed, and dangerous. As the orchestra swelled and conversations buzzed, Sarah glanced at the reflection of the ballroom in the mirror behind the bar. Her own eyes looked back at her, steady and knowing. And somewhere deep inside, she smiled, because Jake Miller had no idea that his perfect little empire was already beginning to crumble. The Plaza Hotel glittered that night like a jewel dropped in the center of Manhattan. Every chandelier shimmered, every flute of champagne sparkled under golden light. The gala was the firm's biggest event of the year, and Jake Miller was supposed to be the man of the hour. His campaign had just been approved, his name was on every press release, and his confidence filled the room like smoke. But what he didn't know, what no one in that ballroom suspected, was that Sarah was already several steps ahead of him. She stood near the balcony doors, her navy gown cascading like midnight silk, a calm smile playing at her lips. In her clutch was her phone, recording quietly, just as Marcus had advised. Across the room she could see Jake and Emily posing for photographers, their smiles wide and hollow. Every flash of the camera reminded Sarah of the night she once believed in that same smile. Tonight, it no longer hurt. It fueled her. "Sarah," a familiar voice said behind her. It was Marcus, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, his expression unreadable. "Everything's ready?" She nodded. "Every file, every message, every document. I've sent them to the firm's legal department anonymously. By morning, they'll know who's been stealing corporate assets." Marcus smiled faintly. "And him?" She looked toward Jake. "He's about to realize what it feels like to lose control." The orchestra swelled as the host took the stage, welcoming guests. Jake walked toward the microphone, his arm around Emily. His voice echoed through the ballroom, smooth and confident. "Tonight, we celebrate the future of our company, a future built on loyalty, innovation, and trust." Sarah nearly laughed. The irony was delicious. As he continued his speech, Marcus subtly handed her a small envelope. Inside was a flash drive. "The last piece," he whispered. "It's the footage from the Ritz-Carlton lobby. You'll want to see it." Sarah's eyes flickered. "You got it?" "Security owed me a favor." The footage, taken weeks earlier, showed Jake and Emily leaving the hotel late at night, arms entwined, laughing like they owned the world. The timestamp, lined perfectly with the business trip Jake had told her, was strictly professional. Sarah felt a chill of vindication wash over her. When the applause erupted at the end of his speech, Jake stepped down from the stage, basking in the praise. He didn't see Sarah until she was standing directly in front of him. "Sarah," he said smoothly, masking surprise. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she said, her tone polite but edged with steel. "You always liked beautiful things, didn't you?" His smile faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before she could answer, Emily appeared at his side, clutching his arm. "Jake, we should." Sarah's gaze shifted to her. "Relax, Emily. You'll have plenty of time to explain everything soon enough." Emily blinked, confusion flickering. "Explain what?" Sarah leaned in, her voice soft enough for only them to hear. "The boardroom recordings, the forged transfers, the emails from your personal account. You didn't think deleting them erased the trail, did you?" Jake's jaw tightened, his mask slipping. "You're bluffing." "Maybe," she said, smiling faintly. "Or maybe by tomorrow morning, your inbox won't be the only thing empty." Before he could respond, Marcus appeared beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. "Everything's in motion," he murmured. Sarah looked at Jake one last time. "Enjoy the party while it lasts." She turned and walked toward the exit, the orchestra swelling behind her like a final act. Every eye followed her, whispers spreading through the crowd. Outside, the cold Manhattan air greeted her like an old friend. She took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in months. Above her, the city lights blinked like stars. Inside, Jake Miller's empire was already starting to crumble, and for the first time, Sarah didn't feel afraid. She felt alive. And when her phone buzzed moments later with a single message from the firm's HR director, "We need to talk first thing tomorrow," she knew the storm she had unleashed had just begun. Morning light crawled over Manhattan like a quiet reckoning. By 7 a.m., the front page of every business feed had the same headline: "Corporate Vice President under investigation for fraud and misconduct." Jake Miller's face stared back from every tablet and TV in the city, his once perfect smile replaced by something hollow. Sarah sat by the window of her father's townhouse on the Upper East Side, the New York Times spread across the table beside a cooling cup of coffee. The silence was thick, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing all morning, reporters, colleagues, lawyers. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she scrolled through the messages Marcus had sent overnight. Updates, screenshots, official confirmations. Every piece of evidence had landed exactly where it needed to. Jake's digital empire, his emails, secret transfers, and hotel receipts had folded like a house of cards. She glanced at the clock. 8:15 a.m. In 15 minutes, Jake would walk into the firm expecting business as usual, only to find security waiting with a termination letter and an escort out the door. Sarah took a slow breath. She wasn't going to be there to see it. She didn't need to. Her father entered the room, his uniform pressed, his movements precise as always. General William Harris didn't often show emotion, but his eyes softened when he looked at her. "I saw the news," he said. "You did what you had to do." She nodded quietly. "It wasn't revenge, Dad. It was justice." He poured himself coffee, studying her. "Sometimes they're the same thing," she smiled faintly. "You always did love your poetic quotes." He chuckled, then grew serious. "I'm proud of you, Sarah. You didn't let him break you." Her throat tightened. For months she'd lived in the shadow of fear and humiliation, but those days were gone. The woman sitting at that table wasn't the one Jake had tried to erase. When the clock struck 8:30, she imagined him arriving at the firm, the glass doors closing behind him, the confused glances, the whispers. Then the moment the HR director approached, folder in hand, she didn't need to see his reaction to know it. The world he'd built on lies had finally collapsed. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Marcus. "It's done." 2 words. That was all it took for the weight on her chest to lift completely. She closed her eyes, letting out a slow, trembling breath. Later that day, she returned to the penthouse one last time. The doorman greeted her with cautious sympathy. "Rough day for Mr. Miller," he said. "Not as rough as he deserves," she replied softly. The apartment was silent. His belongings were still there, suits neatly hung, watches lined up on the dresser, the scent of his cologne lingering in the air. But everything felt smaller now, like a stage after the actors had left. Sarah moved slowly through the rooms, picking up only what mattered: her journals, her laptop, her favorite framed photo of her and her father. Everything else, every memory tied to betrayal, she left behind. Before leaving, she placed one final item on the marble counter: the Mont Blanc pen Emily had given him, a quiet reminder of where his downfall began. As she closed the door, she whispered, "Goodbye, Jake." Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. The city, alive and relentless, moved on without hesitation. Sarah walked toward the waiting car where Marcus stood beside the door. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. "For everything that comes next." He smiled. "Then let's go build something that's actually ours." As they drove through the streets of Manhattan, the skyline stretched above them, shimmering, endless, full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah Miller didn't feel like she was running from her past. She was walking straight into her future. 2 months later, Manhattan moved with its usual rhythm. But for Sarah Miller, every step now carried new purpose. The scandal had died down in the press, replaced by fresher headlines, but within the city's quiet corners, people still whispered her name, with respect. She sat inside a glass-walled office on the 27th floor of a new building in Soho. Her reflection shimmered against the skyline, stronger, calmer. The gold letters etched on the glass door read, "Harris and Wright Media Consulting." It was her company, her vision, her comeback. Marcus stood across the room, sleeves rolled up, scrolling through numbers on his tablet. "We hit 500,000 in pre-orders for the new campaign," he said, grinning. "You realize that, right? You're officially back in the game." Sarah smiled, though her eyes stayed focused on the city beyond the window. "Not back," she corrected softly. "This time, I'm building my own table." She walked toward the conference room, where a small team waited, young professionals who looked at her not with pity, but admiration. She handed them each a sleek folder. "This company isn't about revenge," she said, her tone steady, confident. "It's about integrity. We win because we tell the truth, even when it costs us." Heads nodded around the table. They believed her. After the meeting, Marcus caught up to her in the hallway. "You know," he said, leaning against the glass wall, "the board from your old firm reached out again. They're asking if you'd consider a consulting contract." Sarah laughed quietly. "After everything, they have nerve. They said it's business, not personal." Exactly the problem, she replied. Marcus watched her for a moment, then said gently, "You've changed." She tilted her head. "How so? You used to look like someone waiting to be rescued. Now you look like someone who doesn't need to be." She smiled, a little sadly. "Maybe that's what it takes, losing everything to realize you were never helpless." That evening, she met her father for dinner at the River Cafe, the same restaurant where Jake once met Emily. The soft piano music played in the background, but this time the air felt lighter. "I saw the article about your company," her father said, setting down his fork. "You're making waves again." "Good waves, I hope." "The best kind," he said with a proud smile. "You turned pain into power, Matt. Most people never get that far." Sarah sipped her tea, looking out at the Brooklyn Bridge glowing in the twilight. "It wasn't just me. Marcus believed when I couldn't." Her father raised an eyebrow. "Marcus, huh? Should I be expecting another announcement soon?" She laughed. "Slow down, Dad. One life rebuild at a time." But later that night, standing by the window of her new apartment overlooking Central Park, she thought about those words. Marcus had been there when the world collapsed around her, steady, patient, never asking for more than her honesty. And she was finally learning what real partnership looked like. Respect, not possession. Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. "You won, Sarah, but don't think I'm finished." Her heart froze. The message was unsigned, but she knew the tone. "Jake." She stared at it for a long moment before deleting it without a word. He no longer had power over her. Not through threats, not through fear. The woman he had tried to silence had become everything he could never control. She looked out at the glittering city, its heartbeat matching her own. "Let him talk," she whispered. "I've already moved on." And somewhere deep inside, for the first time since everything began, Sarah didn't feel like a survivor anymore. She felt like a creator of her life, her destiny, her peace. Winter arrived quietly in Manhattan, dusting the rooftops with snow. From her apartment on Central Park West, Sarah watched the flakes drift through the morning light, her reflection soft against the glass. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't running from the past, she was living in the present. Her mornings were simple now. Coffee in a Tiffany mug, a playlist of old jazz on her iPhone, a short walk through the park before heading to her office downtown. The chaos had faded, replaced by rhythm. Peace. But peace, she realized, wasn't the same as stillness. It was work. It was forgiveness. That day she met Marcus at a small cafe in Soho. The place was cozy, all warm wood and soft conversation, the smell of espresso lingering in the air. He was already there, laptop open, 2 cups of coffee waiting. "You look like you slept for a week," he teased. She smiled. "I might have. Turns out not having to worry about lawsuits or betrayal helps with insomnia." He laughed, then turned serious. "So how are you really?" Sarah stirred her coffee. "I'm figuring it out. I keep waiting to feel like myself again, but maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe that version of me doesn't exist anymore." Marcus leaned back, studying her. "Good. She shouldn't. You've outgrown her." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt safe. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering the streets in white. Later that afternoon, back at the office, Sarah walked past the glass conference room where her team was deep in discussion. They were brainstorming for a new client, a women's empowerment nonprofit. She paused, listening as one of the interns presented a tagline: "Rebuild, rise, repeat." It hit her like a heartbeat. 3 words that summed up everything she'd lived through. "Use it," she said with a smile, stepping into the room. "That's the message. That's our story." The team applauded, and in that moment, Sarah felt something shift again. For months, she had been trying to escape the narrative of betrayal, to bury the pain. But maybe, she thought, healing wasn't about erasing what happened. Maybe it was about transforming it. That evening, she received an invitation, an industry gala at the Ritz-Carlton. The same kind of event that once symbolized her humiliation now felt like a new stage. "You should go," Marcus said when she showed him the card. "I don't need to be seen," she replied. "Maybe not, but maybe it's time people see what resilience looks like." She hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe you're right." The night of the gala, Sarah arrived in a simple black gown, elegant, understated, powerful. The hotel lobby gleamed under crystal lights, but she wasn't nervous. She'd faced worse storms than a ballroom full of stairs. People turned when she entered. Some whispered, Others smiled. She moved through them gracefully, greeting those who had once doubted her with calm politeness. She no longer needed validation. At one point, she stepped out onto the terrace. The city lights stretched endlessly before her, and for the first time she felt gratitude, not for what she'd endured, but for who she'd become because of it. Marcus joined her, his coat draped over her shoulders. "You did it," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I'm just getting started." Below them, the streets of Manhattan pulsed with life. The world kept moving, but now she moved with it. No longer a victim, no longer a name in a scandal. And as the snow began to fall again, Sarah Miller realized that the storm hadn't destroyed her. It had carved her into something unbreakable. The night of the Winter Charity Gala unfolded like a scene from an old movie. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton shimmered with gold and white, chandeliers dripping light over tables set with crystal and silver. Outside, snow drifted softly down on Central Park South, but inside, everything glowed with polished perfection. Sarah arrived just after 8, her black gown simple but commanding. Her hair was swept back, her diamond earrings catching the light only when she moved. Every step she took drew eyes, not because of scandal this time, but because of the quiet confidence she carried like a crown. "Mrs. Miller, it's been too long," one executive greeted, shaking her hand. She smiled easily. "It's Sarah now." Across the room, Marcus watched from the bar, a faint grin on his face. "You were right," he murmured to a colleague. "They don't see a victim anymore. They see power." As the orchestra began to play, Sarah found herself surrounded by conversations and laughter. But even amid the music and champagne, she could feel it, the shift in the air, a current pulling at the edge of her awareness. Then she saw him, Jake. He stood near the far entrance, his tuxedo sharp, his expression perfectly practiced. The crowd seemed to part around him like instinct. His hair was shorter now, his jaw tense, his charm dulled by the months of exposure and disgrace. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Time didn't stop, it just stretched, slow and deliberate. The last time they'd been in a room like this, she'd been invisible, broken. Tonight, she was everything he wasn't, steady, untouchable, free. Jake hesitated, then began to walk toward her. The orchestra's strings rose as he crossed the marble floor. She didn't move. "Sarah," he said when he reached her, voice low, almost pleading, "you look different." "Free tends to look that way," she replied evenly. He forced a smile. "You've made your point. The company, the press, my father, everyone knows. Can we stop now?" She tilted her head slightly. "Stop what? Telling the truth?" "Sarah, please," he said, lowering his voice. "I've lost everything. Isn't that enough for you?" Her eyes softened, but not with sympathy. "You think this was about revenge. It wasn't. You destroyed yourself the moment you forgot what loyalty meant." He looked away, shame flickering behind his composure. "I made mistakes." "You made choices," she corrected, "and now you live with them." He swallowed hard. "And what about us?" "There is no us," she said quietly. "There's just what you taught me, and what I did with it." The silence between them was sharp, heavy. Then a voice from behind broke it. Marcus, approaching calmly, his presence grounding her. "Everything okay here?" he asked, though his eyes never left Jake. Jake straightened, his pride flashing briefly. "You must be the new one." Marcus smiled faintly. "Not new, just someone who knows what respect looks like." Jake's jaw tightened. He started to respond, but Sarah stopped him with a quiet shake of her head. "Don't," she said. "Whatever you're trying to save doesn't exist anymore." She turned to Marcus, her hand brushing his arm lightly. "Come on, there's someone I want you to meet." As they walked away, Jake stood frozen among the glitter and laughter, suddenly small beneath the chandelier light. The orchestra swelled again, the melody bittersweet. At the far end of the ballroom, reporters had gathered near the charity display. When Sarah approached, flashbulbs erupted, photographers capturing her alongside Marcus, the caption already forming in their minds. Sarah Miller returns to the spotlight stronger than ever. And though the music, the chatter, and the applause surrounded her, the only thing she felt was peace. Because that night at the Ritz-Carlton, the woman Jake once tried to silence didn't just survive, she reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her story before the whole world's eyes. The following morning, the air in Manhattan felt heavy with aftermath. The charity gala had made headlines, not just for its elegance but for the whispers that spread like wildfire afterward. Someone had leaked the footage. Sarah woke to a dozen missed calls, her phone vibrating against the nightstand. She reached for it slowly, still half asleep. The first notification froze her heart. Breaking news. Exclusive video of Jake Miller's secret meetings surfaces online. She sat upright. The room seemed to tilt. Within minutes, her phone filled with messages. Friends, colleagues, reporters. Marcus's name appeared last. It's everywhere. Are you okay? She took a deep breath before replying. I didn't release it. He texted back instantly, but whoever did just buried him for good. Sarah turned on the TV. There it was. The video Marcus had once shown her privately, now playing on every news network. Jake and Emily in the Ritz-Carlton lobby, laughing, holding hands, stepping into an elevator together. The footage wasn't explicit, but it was damning. His last defense, that their affair was just rumor, was gone. The newscaster's voice cut through her daze. Sources claim the leak came from an anonymous insider close to the investigation. The footage, time-stamped during a major corporate deal, raises new questions about financial misconduct and personal ethics. Her stomach churned. She hadn't planned for this. She wanted truth, not spectacle. Yet deep inside, she knew this was inevitable. Lies always collapse louder than silence. At the office, the day moved in slow motion. People stared, whispered. A few came up to her desk, offering sympathy she didn't ask for. By noon, Marcus appeared in her doorway holding 2 coffees. You've seen the news? She nodded. It's a lot. He sat opposite her, lowering his voice. Do you think Jake suspects you? Maybe, she admitted. But it doesn't matter anymore. There's nothing left for him to use against me. Marcus hesitated, then pulled something from his briefcase, a thin folder marked confidential. There's more you need to see. Inside were adoption papers dated decades earlier. Her brows furrowed as she read the names. Emily Harrison, adopted at age 7. The name of the adoptive father made her blood run cold. General William Harris. Sarah stared at Marcus. No, that's not possible. He nodded grimly. It's true. Emily was adopted, but she was sent to a private school abroad after your mother passed. Your father never talked about it. I found the record while digging into the corporate case. Sarah's world spun. You're telling me? Emily is my sister? Marcus's voice softened. Half-sister, technically, but yes. The realization hit like a wave. Years of betrayal, rewritten in a single moment. The woman who'd ruined her marriage, the one Jake had chosen over her, wasn't just an intruder. She was family. That evening, Sarah drove uptown to her father's townhouse. Snow fell in lazy spirals as she climbed the steps. When he opened the door, his face went pale. He already knew why she'd come. Dad, she said, her voice trembling. Is it true? He didn't answer immediately. The silence told her everything. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. I wanted to protect you, he said quietly. Emily's mother, she was a mistake from before I met your mother. I kept it buried. I thought it was better that way. Sarah's throat burned. You let her into my life without warning me. She destroyed everything. I didn't know she was involved with him, he said, anguish etched across his face. If I had. She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. You always taught me to face the truth, even when it hurts. How could you hide this? The old soldier had no words. Sarah stepped into the cold night, her breath shaking in the air. The city lights blurred, reflecting in her tears. First my husband, now my sister, she whispered. And as the snow fell harder, Sarah realized the betrayal had always been closer than she ever imagined, and the truth was only beginning to unravel. The city hadn't stopped moving, but for Sarah, time had lost its rhythm. The revelation about Emily echoed in her mind like a siren she couldn't silence. My sister. The words felt foreign, impossible, yet every detail fit too perfectly to deny. That morning, she sat by the window of her office, staring blankly at the snow-covered streets below. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Across the room, Marcus stood quietly, watching her battle between fury and grief. Say something, he urged gently. What am I supposed to say? She whispered. That my half-sister slept with my husband? That my father lied to me for 30 years? Marcus crossed the room, resting a hand on the back of her chair. You don't have to say anything yet, just breathe. She shook her head. No, Marcus, breathing doesn't fix betrayal. The phone on her desk buzzed, a name flashing across the screen. Emily Harrison. For a long moment, Sarah just stared at it. Then, against every instinct, she answered. Sarah, Emily's voice trembled on the other end, soft and careful. Please don't hang up." "What do you want?" Sarah said flatly. "I didn't know," Emily blurted out. "I swear I didn't know about the adoption until this morning. Jake told me everything when the story broke. He showed me the papers. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Sarah laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean to steal my husband, my company, my peace? I didn't know you were my sister." Emily's voice cracked. If you had," Sarah interrupted, "would you have stopped, or just hidden it better?" The silence stretched between them, fragile and painful. "Sarah, please," Emily whispered. "Dad wants to talk to us both. He says he can explain." "I've heard enough of his explanations," Sarah said quietly. "Tell him I'm done." She hung up before Emily could respond. The phone dropped to the desk with a dull thud. Marcus exhaled. "You know she'll come looking for you." "Matt, let her," Sarah replied coldly. "I have nothing left to lose." But later that evening, she found herself outside her father's townhouse again. Snow covered the steps, the kind that muffled sound and memory. The door opened before she could knock. General Harris stood there, older somehow, shoulders heavy. "Sarah," he said softly, "come in." She hesitated, then stepped inside. Emily was already there, sitting on the edge of the couch, eyes red from crying. The sight of her made Sarah's stomach twist. She looked so familiar. Same eyes, same tilt of the chin, but everything else was tainted. Her father motioned for them to sit. "I never meant for it to come to this," he began. "Emily's mother was a mistake I made when I was young. I didn't even know she had been born until years later. When your mother died, I tried to reach out, to fix it quietly. I helped her financially, but I thought it was best to keep the two of you apart." Sarah's voice was steady, but cold. "You didn't keep us apart, Dad. You made us enemies." He flinched. "I'm sorry." Emily reached for Sarah's hand. "Please, I can't change what happened with Jake, but I want to make things right." Sarah pulled her hand back. "You can't rewrite history with apologies." Her father's voice trembled. "Sarah, forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it keeps it from owning you." She stood, tears welling in her eyes. "You both made choices that destroyed my trust. I can forgive you someday, but not today." She turned toward the door, her breath visible in the cold air. Outside, the snow had turned to rain, melting into the city lights. Sarah looked up at the skyline, the weight of family and betrayal pressing against her chest. And as thunder rumbled far above, she realized that some storms don't destroy, they cleanse. And tomorrow, she would begin again, this time on her own terms. 2 weeks after the confrontation at her father's house, Manhattan was thawing out from the last snow of winter. But for Jake Miller, the season had no warmth left to give. On a gray Monday morning, news broke again. This time, not just scandal, but consequence. Jake's assets were officially frozen. The company's board had released a statement citing irreversible ethical breaches and financial misconduct. His name, once synonymous with ambition, now carried the quiet sting of disgrace. In his half-empty apartment downtown, Jake sat slumped over a cluttered table. The blinds were drawn, the air stale. Empty bottles lined the counter, the Rolex on his wrist long pawned for cash. His phone buzzed again and again, lawyers, reporters, former friends, all ignored. He scrolled through the headlines in disbelief. Corporate fraud, misuse of funds, breach of trust. Each phrase stabbed deeper. His reflection in the screen was unshaven, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. And worse than the noise of the world outside was the silence from Sarah. He had expected anger, confrontation, maybe even revenge, but she'd given him nothing. No calls, no texts, no response. It was as if she had erased him completely, and somehow that hurt more than all the headlines combined. He grabbed his phone and typed a message he'd never send. "I'm sorry." Then deleted it. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah stood in the lobby of her new office tower, Harris and Wright Media. The company was thriving. Clients trusted her authenticity, admired her resilience. She had become a quiet symbol of integrity in an industry built on masks. Marcus walked beside her, handing her a folder. "The investor meeting's at 4, and just so you know, Jake's situation is all over the news again." She sighed softly. "Let it run its course. You don't even want to look?" "No," she said, her voice calm. "He's already lost everything I could have taken." She headed to her office, closing the glass door behind her. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing. There was no satisfaction in his downfall, only closure. That evening, she attended a charity event at the River Cafe. The same restaurant where Jake had once sat with Emily. The same skyline, the same piano, but everything else had changed. Reporters had gathered outside. When they saw her, cameras flashed. "Miss Miller? Any comment on your ex-husband's charges?" She paused, smiling faintly. "No comment, but I do hope everyone finds their peace eventually." Inside, the soft glow of candlelight flickered across her face. Marcus joined her at the table, raising an eyebrow. "You handled that well." "I'm done fighting ghosts," she replied. "I'm living forward now." As they talked, a waiter approached, slipping a small envelope onto the table. "This just arrived for you, ma'am." Sarah frowned, opening it carefully. Inside was a short handwritten note. "You were right. I became the man I swore I'd never be. I hope one day you'll remember me before I lost myself. J.M." She read it twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into her purse. Marcus studied her expression. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, because for once, I don't need closure from him. I already gave it to myself." Outside, the city lights shimmered on the river, the bridge glowing against the dark sky. The orchestra began to play, soft and slow. Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling the rhythm of the moment, the hum of conversation, the laughter, the sound of life continuing. Across the table, Marcus smiled. "You don't realize how strong you look right now." She smiled back, her voice steady. "Strength isn't something you find, it's something you decide to keep." And as the music swelled and the night deepened, Sarah Miller finally felt what she had been chasing all along. Not revenge, not victory, but peace. Spring in New York had a way of turning even the hardest memories into something softer. By April, the scandal had faded into background noise, replaced by newer stories, newer faces. Yet, for Sarah Miller, the chapter wasn't quite finished. The city buzzed with anticipation for the annual Women in Leadership Gala, a high-profile event at the Metropolitan Ballroom honoring female entrepreneurs who had redefined resilience. Sarah's name was on the list, not as a guest, but as a keynote speaker. It was her first public appearance since everything ended. That afternoon, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, the skyline stretching behind her. The gown she chose was ivory silk, minimal and timeless, paired with a simple diamond pendant. Nothing screamed for attention. Everything spoke of quiet power. Her father called as she was fastening her bracelet. "You sure you're ready for this?" She smiled faintly. "I was born ready, Dad. I just forgot for a while." He chuckled softly. "You've made me proud, Sarah. Don't forget, you earned every second of this moment." "I won't," she promised. When she arrived at the venue, the flashes began almost immediately. Cameras lit up the marble entrance as journalists called her name. But this time, the attention didn't sting, it felt earned. Inside, the ballroom gleamed with soft gold light. Tables were adorned with white roses and crystal glassware. The energy was electric but elegant, filled with women who had built empires from ashes. Marcus met her near the stage, his tux crisp, his smile warm. "You look incredible," he said. "So do you," she replied, taking his arm. "You ready to hear me speak in front of 1,000 people?" "I was ready the day you decided to stop hiding," he said. The host's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Please welcome Sarah Miller, founder and CEO of Harrison Wright Media." Applause thundered as she walked to the stage, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She paused at the podium, scanning the crowd, faces expectant, curious, inspired. For a moment, the lights were blinding. Then, everything settled into clarity. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. 2 years ago, I stood in a room much like this one. I was a wife, an executive, and a woman who thought she had everything. But in one moment, it all fell apart. My husband betrayed me, my career vanished, my confidence shattered. I thought I'd never stand again. The room was silent. She continued, "But what I learned is that strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from standing back up. Pain taught me discipline. Betrayal taught me honesty. And loss taught me how to build something that no one could take away." Applause rose, warm and genuine. Sarah smiled. "If you're sitting here tonight thinking your story is over, I promise you, it's not. The ending isn't when someone breaks you. It's when you decide who you'll become next." The crowd erupted again. Some stood, some wiped tears, and for the first time Sarah didn't just feel seen, she felt understood. After her speech, Marcus joined her on the balcony overlooking the city lights. "You just changed some lives in there," he said softly. she looked out over the skyline. Maybe, but mostly, I changed mine. He handed her a glass of sparkling water. To new beginnings. She clinked it gently against his. To endings that finally make sense. Below them, New York pulsed like a living thing. Noisy, beautiful, relentless. The wind carried the faint echo of applause, mingled with the hum of traffic and laughter. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, letting the city wrap around her like an old friend. She wasn't the same woman who once cried on a marble floor. She was something rarer, rebuilt, redefined, and radiant. And as she turned back toward Marcus, the lights of Manhattan reflecting in her eyes, Sarah Miller knew the storm was truly over, and the world was finally hers. The morning after the gala, the city was bathed in soft gold. Sarah woke to sunlight spilling through her curtains, her phone buzzing with hundreds of notifications. Videos of her speech had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, thousands of comments, stories calling her the woman who rose again. She smiled quietly. For the first time, the world wasn't talking about her pain. It was talking about her strength. Downstairs, Marcus was already at the kitchen island, sipping coffee and scrolling through articles on his iPad. "You're trending everywhere," he said with a grin. "CNN, Forbes, even Vogue. You're officially the comeback queen." Sarah laughed softly, pouring herself tea. "I didn't do it for them, but it's nice to know the story's finally mine." Her peace didn't last long. Her phone rang again, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Miller?" The voice on the other end was formal. "This is Detective Cooper with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you regarding Jake Miller." Her breath caught. "What about him?" "He's been arrested," the detective said. "Multiple charges: fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. We believe you might be entitled to restitution as a victim. We'll need you to come down for a statement." For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. The words didn't shock her, but they carried a strange finality. "I'll be there this afternoon," she said finally. When she hung up, Marcus studied her expression. "Jake?" she nodded. "It's over. Officially, this time." At the precinct later that day, Sarah sat across from the detective, calm and composed. On the table lay a stack of documents, evidence she'd once gathered herself. "He's been under investigation for months," the detective explained. "Your files helped us connect the missing pieces. You did more than save yourself. You stopped a much bigger crime." Sarah exhaled slowly. "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth." "That's what justice is," the detective said. Outside, reporters had gathered like vultures. Cameras flashed as Sarah exited the building, but she didn't hide. She walked straight through the crowd, head held high. Someone shouted, "Sarah, what would you say to Jake if he could hear you now?" She paused, looked toward the cameras, and spoke clearly. "I hope he finds peace, but I already have mine." The clip aired across every network within hours. Meanwhile, Jake sat in a holding cell, the buzz of fluorescent lights above him. The walls felt too close, the air too still. In his hand, he clutched the only thing he had left, a folded photograph of him and Sarah from years ago, before ambition poisoned everything. He stared at it until his vision blurred. For the first time, he understood what real loss meant. Not money, not reputation, but love. Back in her office that evening, Sarah watched the city come alive with sunset. Marcus entered quietly, setting down 2 glasses of sparkling water. "It's done," he said. "You won." She turned from the window, her eyes soft but sure. "I didn't win, Marcus. I healed. There's a difference," he smiled. "Either way, you're free." They clinked glasses, the sound gentle against the hum of the city below. Later, alone, she opened her laptop and began drafting an email to the board of her former company. The subject line read, "Partnership Proposal." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she smiled to herself. The world had tried to bury her, but she'd learned to grow through concrete. As the city lights flickered on, Sarah whispered to the reflection in her window, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." And somewhere in a cold Manhattan jail, Jake Miller finally understood that the woman he once underestimated had not just survived, she had transcended him entirely. Summer arrived in Manhattan with its usual electricity, streets alive, cafes overflowing, and sunlight bouncing off the skyline like glass and gold. For Sarah Miller, it felt like a new season in every sense. 3 months had passed since Jake's sentencing. The storm was finally gone, and in its wake came something she had almost forgotten existed: peace. That morning she stood on the terrace of her new penthouse overlooking Central Park. The air smelled of jasmine and roasted coffee drifting from the street below. In her arms, she held her newborn son, Noah. Tiny, warm, perfect. "Good morning, little warrior," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "We made it." Downstairs, Marcus was already at the kitchen counter, a newspaper folded beside his coffee. When she entered, he looked up and smiled in that quiet, familiar way that still caught her off guard. "You didn't sleep again," he said gently. She shrugged. "He likes to remind me he's in charge." He grinned. "He gets that from you." She laughed softly, setting Noah's carrier on the table. The baby yawned, stretching his tiny fingers. The sound filled the room with a kind of light no chandelier could ever match. Marcus handed her the newspaper. "You should see this." The headline read, "From Scandal to Success, Sarah Miller's story becomes a global movement." Beneath it was a photo of her speaking at the gala months ago, her words now printed in magazines and quoted on social media. "They're calling it the Miller effect," Marcus said. "You've inspired a wave of women launching startups after betrayal or loss. You realize that, right?" Sarah smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted my life back." "Maybe both can exist," Marcus said. She looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd stood beside her through every battle, who'd never demanded anything in return. "You've been here through everything, Marcus. Why?" He met her gaze, his voice quiet but sure. "Because I believed in the version of you that the world forgot." For a moment, silence filled the room, warm, unspoken. The city hummed beyond the glass. Later that afternoon, they took Noah to the park. The trees shimmered in the heat, the laughter of children floating through the air. Sarah sat on a bench, watching Marcus push the stroller down the path, sunlight glinting off his watch. It hit her then, not the loss, not the pain, but the gratitude. Every wrong turn had led her here, to this exact moment, where love didn't demand proof and peace didn't feel temporary. An older woman passing by stopped to coo over the baby. "He's beautiful," she said. "Looks just like his mother." Sarah smiled. "Let's hope he gets his heart from someone better." When the woman walked away, Marcus returned and sat beside her. "He'll get it from both of us," he said. They watched the sunset bleed into the city, the sky painted in soft pinks and gold. Sarah leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder, the quiet rhythm of Noah's breathing grounding her. "I used to think healing meant going back," she said softly. "Now I know it means moving forward." Marcus turned to her. "So where do we go from here?" She smiled. "Anywhere, everywhere, as long as it's honest." The city lights blinked to life, one by one reflecting in her eyes. For the first time, she felt like she belonged, not to anyone else, but to herself. And as the evening wind swept through Central Park, Sarah Miller finally understood the truth she'd spent years chasing. Freedom wasn't the absence of pain. It was the courage to build joy on top of it. A full year had passed since that night of reckoning, and Manhattan was alive with the hum of possibility. From the balcony of her office on Park Avenue, Sarah Miller looked out over the skyline. The same city that had once watched her break was now witnessing her thrive. Below, the world moved at its usual frantic pace. But up here, everything was still. The morning light poured across her desk, illuminating the framed photo of her and Noah, now toddling and full of life, his smile wide and fearless. She sipped her coffee and opened her inbox. Dozens of invitations waited, speaking engagements, interviews, collaborations. The most recent was from Forbes Women in Power, inviting her to be the keynote speaker at their global summit in Los Angeles. For a long moment, she just stared at it, remembering the woman she used to be, the one who doubted, apologized, and bent herself to fit someone else's comfort. That woman was gone. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Miller, Marcus is here." "Send him in," she said, smiling. He entered, holding 2 coffees and that same familiar grin. "You know," he said, setting one cup down, "your assistant treats me like I'm already the boss." Sarah laughed. "That's because you never stopped acting like one." They sat across from each other, the air between them comfortable, steady. He nodded toward her computer. "Forbes Summit, huh? Big stage." "Bigger than anything I've done," she admitted. "But maybe it's time." He studied her face. "You know what I love most about this version of you?" She raised an eyebrow. "What?" "You don't talk about proving people wrong anymore. You just prove yourself. That made her smile, the kind that reached her eyes. Maybe that's what healing really is, she said, choosing peace over performance. Later that afternoon, Sarah walked through the offices of Harrison Wright Media. Her team paused their work to greet her. Smiles, laughter, admiration. These weren't just employees, they were believers. Every wall told their story. Photographs of charity events, partnerships with women-led startups, framed headlines of their company's rise. She paused before one headline, From Betrayal to Boardroom, the Sarah Miller story. For the first time, she didn't flinch when she read her own name next to the word betrayal. It wasn't a scar anymore, it was a badge. That evening, she met her father for dinner. The old general looked softer now, his pride tempered by time and regret. He lifted his glass. "To my daughter," he said, "you built something even stronger than an empire. You built yourself." Sarah smiled, eyes glistening. "I had a good teacher. You taught me never to surrender," he chuckled. "You just proved it's possible to fight with grace." After dinner, she returned home. The city was quiet, moonlight spilling across her living room floor. Noah was asleep in his crib, a small hand curled around his blanket. Sarah sat beside him for a moment, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Everything I went through was for you," she whispered. "So you'll never grow up thinking love means losing yourself." Outside, the city pulsed like a living heartbeat. She stepped onto the balcony, the cool wind brushing against her face. Marcus joined her a moment later, wrapping a coat around her shoulders. "You ready for what's next?" he asked. She looked out at the endless lights, her eyes steady. "I'm not afraid of beginnings anymore," he smiled. "Then you're exactly where you're meant to be." As the night deepened over Manhattan, Sarah Miller, the woman once broken by betrayal, stood tall beneath the stars, her story complete, yet still unfolding. Because real victory isn't destroying those who hurt you, it's building a life so full of purpose that their memory no longer matters. So that's it. Our story has come full circle. Hey, my wonderful friends, you're still here with me, right? If you've stayed until this very moment, it means something inside this story touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of your own storms, or the strength you didn't know you had. Sarah's journey isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about rebirth, about learning that peace doesn't come from winning against others, but from mastering yourself. Like Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what healing truly is, turning pain into wisdom and scars into armor. So if you're standing at your own crossroads right now, remember, your story isn't over. You're not broken. You're becoming. If this story spoke to you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and hit subscribe so we can keep walking this journey together. One story, one heart, one healing step at a time. Because just like Sarah, you are not what hurt you, you are what you choose to rise from.